You need to be in the middle so that you can kind of look both ways.
How you doing? Either one of those is fine.
I'll be up there.
Or should I put? Should Melinda be here and to kind of throw it off? And then,
So
oh, we live right now.
Hi, Mom.
Yeah, right, right. No, we can do this. It's bright right here. Jesus, Lord. Are we live? Are we live? Like,
live.
they can hear me live?
Yeah.
Oh man, okay. Oh, my fault. Yeah, I think we're good. It should be 6. You gonna let me know when we live, like when I can start live?
You live.
Oh, we live. We live for real live. We live for real live. I guess I should share it from my phone. Can you, never mind. I was gonna say my phone password out loud just now, but.
To the
I forgot
world.
that I'm
You're going
to
to
the
tell the whole
world,
world.
right? We live.
Fool, that's Kanye. 0000.
Okay, well, it's 5:01. Y'all want to go ahead and get started? I think we should be good. Well, what camera is mine that I'm looking at?
So just, yeah.
Anyone? I
Yeah,
just
when
talk
you see
straight
the
ahead?
red light, that'll be the one that's on.
Okay, perfect. All right. Facebook world, we just talking to our beautiful, beautiful production team here. Beautiful, so beautiful production team. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Thank you guys for joining us on this special day, Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, where we celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I couldn't think of a better way for us to celebrate his legacy through one of the ideals that I found Dr. King to hold most important and true to his heart, and that is of education. And to also couple that with his love for people in general, for the most vulnerable of our populations. And so that's how this conversation was birthed. That's how this idea came about this conversation of COVID-19, which we all are experiencing, and its effects on our most vulnerable populations, our students of color. And so we've assembled a panel of intelligent experts from all different fields, walks of life, and different vast array of experiences on how they are currently in the field and impacting this particular, navigating us through this particular pandemic, right? So from there, I will allow the panel to introduce themselves and give you guys a little bit of information about who they are and what they do. And then from there, we'll jump into our conversation. And what you'll see here tonight will be a mixture of a conversation, a dialogue amongst us, just exploring this particular topic, and then an opportunity for each individual to kind of share their experiences as well. So I will start here to my left with Xavier Duckett.
Good afternoon, evening. My name is Xavier Duckett, owner and founder of the Humble Hustle Company Incorporated, a nonprofit organization that is focused on empowering, exposing, and educating Black youth in the city. We have several different programs. Our Humble Heights program exposes. I'm good. Oh, okay. Our Humble Heights program takes inner city kids and introduces them to the outdoors, environmental science, giving them something that they may not have ever had, showing them that their background and their backyard is outdoors and it's theirs as well. Our Pretty Humble program takes young girls and introduces them to leadership, financial literacy, and entrepreneurship. And we have our Keep Giving initiatives. That's our back to school drive every year and our coat drive. I'm also the owner of Imagine Me Mentoring, and that's where we go in schools and provide groups with at-risk youth, teaching them social and emotional skills. So that's just a little bit what I do. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, thank you, man. Definitely appreciate you. He's doing some great work. To my right here, we have our host for us for this evening, Pastor Charles Wilson.
Yeah, Charles Wilson, the lead pastor of the Hill Church, have a different perspective. We've been here, we've relocated here almost 4 years ago, and so we came in just kind of learning and navigating the context here. Worked with students for 25 years. Born and raised in New Jersey, did ministry in Dallas for 10 years, community development work. And so here, our focus here is in the Northwest. Half of our focus is our ministry and what we do in the community, and then the community development program that we're putting together to do some great things and provide flourishing opportunities for nonprofits in our part of the community.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And to his right, Dr. Melinda Hill.
Hi, I'm Dr. Melinda, and I'm a higher education professional. I've been working in higher education, helping first generation and low-income students get to college, succeed in college for the last 15 years. When I'm working with youth, a lot of times they are the first in their family to go to college, so I have them to look through their experience as leaders. My motto in life is everything rises and falls on leadership. And even if someone is a 15-year-old student, they can be a leader in their home. I'm a John Maxwell coach, and we bring leadership principles, and I start with young people.
And to her right, Abby Hamilton.
Thanks, everybody. I'm Abby Hamilton. I'm president and CEO of your local United Way of Roanoke Valley. Like Pastor Charles, I am not from Roanoke. I moved here about 20 years ago, and I'm an immigrant. So I grew up in the Philippines, worked in nonprofits there on community development, spent the rest of my career here in the Roanoke Valley working on community development, and really focused on the mission of United Way, which is really helping and working alongside our families towards self-sufficiency.
Well, thank you, thank you. So as you guys can see, we have a vast array of experiences here to have this conversation with us this evening. And I wanted to begin by framing our conversation again, since it's the holiday of Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday, framing the conversation around one of his speeches called The Purpose of Education. And so what I've done here is I will ask each particular one of you guys, I will read a quote and ask you guys to respond to the quote around a question I have for you. Since I started to my left with Xavier first, I will start to my right this time with you, Abby. So the quote from Dr. King's speech, it says, "If you want to be important, wonderful. If you want to be recognized, wonderful. If you want to be great, wonderful. But recognize that he who is greatest amongst you shall be your servant." That's a new definition of greatness. By giving that definition of greatness, it means that everybody can be great because everybody can serve. Talk to us a little bit around how the Roanoke community as a whole, from our city government to our local nonprofit agencies, has stepped up to be great in a way of serving our most vulnerable students during this time.
Man, you did your research, I think, because you kind of hit the nail on the head in terms of really what United Way is about. Although I'm here, I'm the one sitting here, and I say, I'm with United Way. United Way really is about everybody coming together and everybody realizing that we each are part of the solution in this community. And we've not seen such a wonderful example of that. And it might be one of the things that came out of this pandemic, right? The beautiful thing, which is the magic of collaboration that is in full force. I look at many of those of you on this stage. Pastor, I've worked with you in terms of the community, working alongside volunteers from the health department, making sure that our most vulnerable families had access to masks, hand sanitizer, and were educated about how to keep themselves safe during the height of the pandemic, during the early months. Xavier has worked with all of our schools and our students and with other after-school programs, and we've had the honor of partnering together to make sure that there are opportunities for students to be productive, to be in a safe and nurturing environment, especially during this time. And the things that we don't see that are wonderful examples of people coming together and working towards something that is bigger than themselves. When students have access to food, when they're not physically in school, that's kind of where the magic happens, and I've been able to see that over the last few months.
That's awesome. I think one of the things that you touched on just now, which is very important, and one of the reasons that I wanted to do this was to offer everybody here an opportunity to hear about some of the things that are great things that are going on within the city of Roanoke that we don't always get an opportunity to see, right, and see and hear about. So one of the things that you mentioned was the opportunities that you and Xavier have worked on around being able to provide continuing education to students. So I think that's a perfect segue, thank you so much, into the quote I had for Xavier. And so the quote says, education must enable a man to become more efficient, to achieve with increasing facility the legitimate goals of his life. I see your organization, Imagine Me, does a lot of work with youth, right? A lot of work with youth, allowing them the opportunity to realize these goals of their lives, right? So talk to us a little bit, one, about what that has looked like for your students who are involved in your program during the pandemic, and then also, how can the community better assist your organization and organizations like yours in sustaining and strengthening those efforts?
Absolutely. I think it goes back to kind of what the quote you said. You said if education, enables someone to be more efficient, I take it back to, does that person even know that he's efficient? It takes it all the way back to ground level, and I think that's what our organization does. It gets all the way down to the ground of like, that social and emotional learning piece is what allows somebody to even believe I'm efficient.
Right.
The education comes in and says, okay, you're more than efficient, and now you can tap into these goals. So I think, this COVID exposed, I was just talking to Charles, and COVID exposed a lot of things. And fortunately, with my mindset and with the people around me and the community that we do have, we were able to tap in and understand that there's opportunity in crisis. And we took full advantage of the opportunity that there was. And that's not to say that everybody had that opportunity, but for us, for an organization that is driven by the love of, making a kid's life better, we took full advantage of the opportunity. I think every day, when we go in there with the kids, I seek a transparency, and I try to teach a transparency to staff and to the adults that are around, to have that transparency with those kids, to let them know that we'll do anything to make sure that their life is better. So that's constantly unlearning and relearning and unlearning and relearning, and letting them know, that we're here, and we're present, and we love them, and I think that's the start of everything. So with that quote, I think when you say, what can the community do, there's got to be a buy-in. There's got to be a buy-in. I look at my community, and we have to understand nobody's going to come and save us. Nobody's going to come and save us. So we have to start buying into our own. And when we start to buy into our own, it starts to develop those leaders. It starts to change the mindset of youth. It starts to change the mindset of the staff, and they start to believe that they can. And once you can instill hope in somebody, they can do anything. Once you can instill hope in somebody that they believe that they can, if you tell me, hey, X, you can jump off of this stage and you'll be
all right.
whatever, you'll be okay. Once you make me believe that, I can do anything. So once I start to instill hope in my kids and my staff and, anybody around me, if I start to instill hope in them, they can. And there's no, like he said, there's no glass ceiling. We were talking, there's no glass ceiling to I can. So I think the community for me is just to buy in, be sold on what we're doing, and hold us accountable. Hold us accountable, and we're gonna hold you accountable as well, because nobody's coming to save us. We have to do this. So if I speak to a parent intentionally and tell them, hey, look, you have to do this. Understand that I'm coming from a place that I can see 10 years of where your child is going to be. So I'm telling you this intentionally, like, please do this. Please do this. Please sit down with your child for 5 minutes. Please check his homework. So I think buy-in right now is the biggest thing for our community. Love, and getting uncomfortable. Getting uncomfortable. I talk about that a lot with people and individuals around me, just getting uncomfortable and understanding that if we forever stay in a complacent place and we forever stay in a place that we're comfortable, we'll never grow. The moment that we step into that uncomfort, jumping off the stage, that's where we start to realize I can. That's where we start to unlock some of our hidden gems and our talents and treasures that nobody else is going to come unlock for us. We have to get uncomfortable. So I would say uncomfortable, get uncomfortable, instill hope in our kids, instill hope in each other, and hold each other accountable, and buy in.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And the focus and the context of Dr. King and what he meant. I think two of the biggest pillars of what Dr. King stood for was hope, and then not just hope, but instilling within everybody the confidence to be able to take action, right? To jump off that stage, right? And so I think that's really good, and I can see it. I can see it when I come by your program, right? I can see the kids in the program, right? You can have different touch points with them where you see their hope strengthening, their hope increasing, right? Their confidence being built in that way. So yeah, I think that's awesome. And it ties into this concept, and I think this particular quote will be great. And I'm gonna throw this one to you, Charles. I'm gonna throw this one to you. So at this point, I often wonder whether or not education is fulfilling its purpose, right? Is it fulfilling its purpose? One, is education fulfilling its purpose? And two, what parts of the purpose of education is it fulfilling? And then what are some of the areas of challenge within education that you see from a community lens that we can shore up or that we can strengthen?
It's a great question. So the first thing I would say, because I know there's a lot of people viewing this with different opinions, but the first thing we have to kind of really tease out is everyone getting the exact same experience? Because everyone isn't. Everyone's experiencing education, everyone's experiencing America, everyone's experiencing this broadcast differently. And so I would say not for everyone, that there are some people who are doing great, have advantages, have amazing teachers. And I'll give an example personally. We moved here, my son wanted to be an engineer. He wanted to go to Virginia Tech. And so when we went to the school, the first question the guidance counselor asked him here at school was, what diploma does he want? And so we moved here from Dallas. I had no idea what she was talking about. What do you mean, what diploma? My son's got a 3.7. He's done 3 years of Latin. What are the differences between the diplomas?
So I was say 3 years of Latin. That's whatever diploma come with that. That's the one I want.
Right, right. So I'm confused. I'm like, is there what's it? Then I found out later that one will not allow you to go to college. And so then my next question is, why would you ask me that question for a kid who finished 5 years of languages before he got to 11th grade?
Right.
And if his dad wasn't here asking that question, would you have automatically chosen for him?
Right.
Then I realized he wasn't even giving some of the better math classes because where we lived. And so on the opposite side of the street, when we lived over here off of Marshall, the kids went to a different school in the city where all the tax dollars went to the same places, but the better math teacher was at the other one. And so if we lived on the other side of the street, he would have gone to a better math teacher. He would have had access to different things, and he probably wouldn't have been asked, which diploma do you want? And so I would say no, unless I lived on the other side of the street. And then even some of my conversations with the school system here was more like, well, we need to fix this because if there's no advocate like an Xavier working for a young student, how is it possible that someone's going to be here to fight for the student? And so now that is, so what I shared with the school system here was, I'm a father, I live here, I'm also a pastor, but I'm also a resource for you. Like, I want to help make this more successful. This isn't just because of my son, because there's a whole lot of brilliant kids here who have no one to fight for them. And so I would say yes, for some people, absolutely. And probably many of us have had advantages and opportunities that people around us didn't have, but then there are other people who had no one there to help them, to push, to ask questions, and to make things better for them. And what was the second part?
And I think you touched on it. So how do we strengthen certain challenge areas within education? But let me ask you this instead, based off of something that you just said, because you said that if that question was, why would they even have asked you that question? And two, what may have happened if you weren't there present to be able to answer that question for children who do not have you, right? Who may not have an Xavier, who may not have a Danielle, right? Who may not have those advocates, whether it's your parent, grandparent, or just a mentor. as a community, that call to action being bought into what Xavier said, can you talk a little bit about how important it is for us to not only take care of our own?
Yeah. So speaking, I'll start from the leadership of like our church. Back in the day, the church led in the community. It was a place for leadership development. This is where you got your first public speaking opportunity. You got your first solo, and so people were like, especially in the black church, they're like, "Go ahead, baby. Even if you're terrible, you can do it." I'm only a preacher today because the old saints told me I was doing okay, and so we've lost some of those avenues. There isn't a lot of support systems. Sports was one of them, and we see a lot of the challenges there, even this year, where some of that isn't there. One of the things we need to kind of go back to is looking and examining some of those older systems that we've kind of done away with and pull out some of the value from those places and go, okay, this was helping here, but now it's being replaced, and we're like asking third-party organizations to do what some of the first-party organizations are supposed to do. And then there's got to be a mindset, like Xavier said, that this is all of our responsibility.
Yes.
Like, even though my son now is in college, I still care about what's happening with 7th grade, 8th grade, and are there other students missing opportunities? So that means we need to be involved. We need to adopt grade levels. We need to adopt nonprofit organizations who are doing the work that other organizations used to do and are failing around, and hold them accountable. And then I would say the last thing, especially for people that live in a community, is to think that way, that this is our community. And so we can't, sometimes because we have relationships with people, or if we've seen people and they're in places, we don't hold people accountable. And that's one of my challenges here, is that because of relationships, I can't say you can do better or call you out. Like we should reevaluate every year and grade people we like and go, if only 80-something% of the kids here are finishing school before the pandemic. The first time I heard the stats here, my heart was broken, and everyone in the room started applauding. And I was like, this is terrible. Why are we celebrating 80? What's happening to those other kids who are not? This isn't something. Now, then I realized it was at 50-something%. So I get it. We moved up 20-something, 30%. But we should still give ourselves a C or a D, and stop celebrating D level, C level stuff as if it's an A plus, and just be honest about it. Like we need to reevaluate. Some people need to be fired. Some people need to be brought in. We need to look at this again next year, and we need to reexamine it. It's not personal, but there are lives at stake, and we just can't play games with people not having opportunity.
Yeah. I think I think that's a challenge for many people, right? Is always being caught between this place of maintaining relationship while also providing that level of accountability to folks, right? And that balancing act, and how do you maintain those two? And I think it's very key what you said in there about getting back to some of the old ways on how we did things, right? I think a lot of times we have completely got away from those roadmaps and those blueprints that have been laid there for us, right? We hear all the time, it takes a village, right? We hear it takes a village, it takes a village, it takes a village. And I often ask myself, well, if we keep saying it takes a village, when in the world is the village going to show up, right? So, and I see it more and more now. So I think that we have to keep pushing in that particular direction. But great response. Appreciate your answer on that. So Dr. Hill, for you, at this point, I think that in your experience in higher education, right? I think that we have to, as Xavier said, look 10 years down the road, right? We can't only focus on what this has done to our students in public K through 12 or in private schools as well. And we can't just look, we have to look beyond what is currently happening, right? So I'll ask you this. These are all quotes again for the audience, whoever just tuned in. Pieces of quotes that I took from Dr. King's speech called The Purpose of Education. So look up The Purpose of Education and you'll find all of these particular quotes in there. The complete education gives one not only the power of concentration, but worthy objectives upon which to concentrate. In your experience, especially within the realm of higher education, kind of talk to us about what are those worthy objectives? Are we providing the worthy objectives to concentrate on? Are worthy objectives strictly just what are on standardized tests? Are those worthy objectives, right? Are worthy objectives, what does a holistic view on what worthy objectives looks like in education from from the cradle to when you graduate college, are we implementing those worthy objectives for our students?
Well, I believe the worthy objection, and I say this a lot, I feel like I preach education, but the worthy objection, education is the #1 way to upward social mobility. And I'm just real with my students. I don't know how to be any other way. Where do you want to live? What do you want to drive? Where do you want to eat at night? Because they understand the language. I'm a first-generation student, so I'm the first in my family to go to college. I saw my sister graduate from high school and go work in a furniture factory. I get my nails done. I'm not working in a furniture factory.
Right.
So therefore, I needed an education.
Right.
So experience is the best teacher. I looked at her experience and I said, that can't be my experience. I'm from middle class America. At the time, you know, we pay our bills, but my parents didn't set aside money to go to college.
Right.
They didn't have some of the opportunities like the Community College Access Program where they can go 2 years free. They didn't have that. So I didn't go to 4-year college, but I did go to 2-year college.
Right.
So from my experience, I tell students, it doesn't matter where you start. It's where you're in. I started in community college, and my first name is Doctor, and my last name is EDD.
Let's go.
So it doesn't matter where you start.
Right.
It matters, you know, where you in, where you want to go, and who is instilling hope, coming alongside you and say, hey, you can do this. But for me, I saw what I didn't want.
Right.
And so, I just speak to my children. A lot of times, you know, they'll come into me and they'll tell me about their home life. Well, let that fill you.
Right.
As soon as you walk across the stage,
Right.
you can be out. Education is the #1 way to upward social mobility. So that objective of where do you want to live, where do you want to eat? I tell my students, you know, that's my Range Rover sitting outside. That's my Lexus. I live, drive, and eat. My kids like to eat out. Where do you want to eat? What do you want your kids, you know, how do you want them to dress? Because that's important to them.
Right.
And if they don't see it at home, there is an example. You
Right.
know, we're educated, we're showing them the way and showing them the life that they can have.
Right.
And so my objective, and hopefully their objective, is to have a better life than your parents
Right.
have. You know, I came from middle class America, but I still want my children to have a better life.
Right.
And education is the #1 way to upward social mobility. And so that's what I push. I push education.
Let me ask you. Let
Push
me ask you this. Then. Well, let me ask the whole panel this, and then I'm coming to you, Danielle. But let me ask the whole panel this. When you talk about those experiences, right? Being able to asking them those questions of, hey, you looked at what you didn't want, and that fueled you to be able to reach and achieve what it is you did want, right? For our kids in lower socioeconomic families, who the day-to-day may be so overwhelmingly difficult to see past, right? What are some of the actual experiential techniques or things we can put in place to walk alongside, say, an Xavier who is trying to instill that hope that, hey, you can jump off this stage into the life that you want to live? What are some of the technical or the skills, and how do we give those skills to those students who are coming from backgrounds and situations where they can't see past, I'm hungry, I haven't eaten in the last day and a half, or I don't want to go to school because my shoes are dirty, and I've had these shoes for the past 3 years and they don't fit, you know, or I'm living in a hotel at the current moment, right? How do we begin to give them those experiences so that the hope that, say, an Xavier is giving them, they are able to actually see somebody else who are doing those things? Because if you rode up on me with your Range Rover, I would believe it. But if I just hear that there's this thing called a Range Rover and all I could do is Google it online, then I never get the opportunity to actually go see the Range Rover, or I don't even hear you say Range Rover, because I'm looking that my stomach is rolling over, right? How do I get to those particular students or to those particular children?
I'll go ahead and answer that. From a social work perspective, very evidence-based theory, and just connecting with Xavier, Pastor Wilson, Maslow's hierarchy of need. Yes, I want you to see these things. I want to instill this hope. But if I can't address these basic needs, I can't hear anything that you're saying to me.
Absolutely.
And one thing I can say about our community here in Roanoke City, I know that we preach. It takes a village, but something has shifted within 2020 where that village is stepping up. Because myself working at Lucy Addison, whatever I put out in the community, it's received times 100.
Right.
So number one, you have to address those needs. Number two, you have to establish a relationship with that child, because you can talk all day long, but if you're not present, if there isn't a rapport, if they don't feel that you're invested, if they don't feel that you really are there for them, none of the things that you're saying is going to get through. So I feel that there are definitely some surface things that have to be addressed first before you're getting to that point where you're able to instill that hope and guide them and nurture them and build them up. Number one, you got to address the elephant in the room, and those are those needs. And number two, building a relationship. Those are two vital and crucial points to receiving any kind of success with these youth today.
Yeah, I think that's great, and definitely, and I think that's a perfect answer to what I was trying to get at are those basic needs, right? How do we begin to address those basic needs and those challenges around those basic needs? And I think that so I'll ask you this since you're here. I just lost it. Change, here it is. Change does not roll in on wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle, right? So talk to us a little bit around what level of commitment, based on what we're seeing right now within the pandemic in education, right? Coming from a school that we all love, Lucy Addison Middle School, right? And seeing some of the challenges that our students face there and the families face at a particular school like Lucy Addison. What level of commitment is the village going to need in order to continuously push through that struggle?
I feel that it has to be 100%. I mean, it is your village. This is your village. We need 100% buy-in, the relationship and the rapport. Like we mentioned before, for some reason within our community specifically, we've seemed to somehow gotten off track with the sense of identity. I grew up in the church. I grew up in the village. I come from parents where they didn't have to be around all the time for me to make sure that I was behaving, because it was going to get back to them. So we need to get back to our beginnings, and I feel like I mentioned earlier, for whatever reason, may be the pandemic, but I do feel that there is a shift where we're seeing, how we have been functioning. It is not working.
Right.
We need to get back to the table, have some discussions. I feel that more people are showing up, but it's going to take 100% dedication. Just because we're not seeing results necessarily right now, that doesn't mean you stop. You keep on going. You keep bringing people to the table. Keep connecting resources. Hey, I don't know what help I can offer, but I'm available.
Right.
So I think it's going to take people being willing to have a seat at the table, being willing to have discussions that may be uncomfortable, being willing to put in the man hours, the effort, and the work, and the time to build the relationships. Again, the conversation may not be what you want to hear, but you need to be present, and you need to show that your presence is there and show that you're dedicated towards seeing some positive change.
Right. I think that's great. And so that idea of being dedicated to making sure that we see that particular positive change, right? Abby shared a term with me earlier today that I hope it's okay if I told everybody you shared it with me.
It was a caffeinated moment.
But I thought it was an interesting term, and I never heard it with the two words put together, but rugged individualism, right? And I immediately went and Googled the term and just started doing some reading on what rugged individualism was. And so anybody can jump in here on this particular question. How will being so focused on what the I needs in any particular moment, what the I wants to see socially, what the I wants to see politically, what the I wants to see economically, what the I wants to see, I think it says socially, but in all of those particular areas, what detriment is that going to be to the we, to the us? So talk about that first, and then I have another question for you guys. Anybody?
Who's I?
You.
What is my I?
Your individual. How will maybe your individual desires or needs maybe impact or get in the way of what is best for the us?
It's crazy because my pastor's been speaking about ego. And that's the conversations I've been having with people is ego. And one thing she said is you're not truly free until ego is gone. And so in my work and in my teachings, in my wisdoms, in my interactions daily, I'm constantly making sure that self is gone. And I believe that within my organization, within anything that I put my heart into, if self is gone, then it's going to flourish because I know that it's not about me. It's tough. It's extremely tough because I have to eat. I want to live. I want to be 30 and have fun.
Right.
Get a Range Rover.
But I want
I want a Range Rover.
I want the Range Rover. Like, I want this stuff. But for me, it goes back to spiritual.
Right.
And I understand that, like, I was just talking to somebody about this today. Like, just imagine if we had that much faith that we knew that no matter what, we're taken care of.
Right.
And so, for me, it goes back to last summer. This pandemic hit, and I wanted to do a summer camp.
Right.
I felt like the kids have been out of school since March. And in my head, I'm just thinking, March, April, May, June, July, August, like, that's a lot of time.
Right.
Now it's been over a year.
Right.
So we held a summer camp. No help, no funding, but I knew without a shadow of a doubt that something would come through.
Right.
I knew that with the people that I put around them, that my kids would be better mentally, socially, physically, emotionally. I knew that. So I had to put self on the back burner.
Right.
And I feel like not all the time do I do it. I'm constantly,
Me and you both.
Yeah, I'm constantly learning and unlearning. I'm unlearning and learning, unlearning and relearning. But it's extremely pivotal that when we walk in those doors every day, we have to understand it's not about us. I'm not a teacher. Our mentors are not teachers.
Right.
But this year, we are teachers. We have become teachers, principals, cafeteria, moms, dads. We don't want to do it.
Right.
I want to wake up and do what I want to do. But I understand that kid wasn't dealt the hand that I was given.
Right.
I truly understand that. And now and so when I walk through those doors, it's like, all right, X, put the laptop away, give them a hug, take them in that room, have that talk with them. Let them understand that you're here and you're not going to give up on them. Let them understand that the work is hard, but he can push through. Let him understand that, these grades may be where they are right now, but he can pass to the next grade. Let him understand that he's loved. Let him understand that he is more. Let him understand that he's confident. All of that goes into it. And a child will truly know. I look at children. I don't have any children, but I look at children sometimes like they're like animals. They can read you the moment they meet you, and they know your intentions. The moment they meet you, they can feel the spirit. They can feel it. So they know whether you're for them or whether you're not. So when you truly put self away and understand and really intentionally go to them with a heart of love and teaching love and understanding, like, it's not about me. I'm going to give everything I can to you because I know at some point whether it's 3 years down the road or whether it's you're 27 and you got a family, you're gonna hear what I said. Like it's gonna come back to you, and hopefully you put it in action.
Appreciate you, man. That's good. Anybody else?
I'll jump in. So I understand your question to be how I, Melinda, can move forward with the collective healing that our communities will need to go through. How can I help with that? How can I get myself out the way to help with that?
Yes, that and let's start with that. Let's
Okay.
start with that. Let's start
So for me, I'm a lifelong learner. And what I've done with Melinda, I have kind of like shut myself down so that I can really prepare for when we come back out. And what I've done is, right now, I'm in the process of being trained in brain-stimulated wellness to help with trauma. And I'm on a pandemic response team. I have a degree in counseling. However, what we've gone through as a community, as a nation,
Right.
we can't take 12 years to sit in therapy and heal. So I'm getting trained in what's called neurokinesis, and it's techniques, they're interventions that a person can do themselves when they feel the anxiety or when they feel the trauma, when they feel it come back up. There are 6 techniques that you self-administer. And with the social unrest, I got extra training in diversity and inclusion. So whatever the world is experiencing, whatever the community is experiencing, I push myself aside. I have 3 kids, a husband and a dog. I push the family and I push that stuff aside so that I can say, God, here's my hands, here's my feet. How can I show up for you in this community? You know, what are your needs? What do you need me to do? And I just transform like a chameleon. Whatever he needs me to do, I transform.
Right. Transformation. That's good.
I'm going to add something, and I'm going to go in a totally different direction here, which is, the context of our conversation
Right.
about rugged individualism. And it's like the 2 schools of thought of, I'm going to power through. I can do this on my own, right? I'm going to do this, or it's your fault. You got to figure it out, right? And versus the reality that life really isn't like that. I mean, we all got to where we are because somebody mentored us when we were younger. Somebody gave us an opportunity. Somebody taught us lessons and they were patient enough. Somebody maybe looked out for you, a neighbor or whatnot. And I was telling Ryan in our conversation that attitude of rugged individualism, of we each have to take care of our own, is going to be to the detriment of us, because we miss the picture of understanding how community really functions. And for us to have a stronger community, and we all belong in one, whether or not it's a small community, big community, or whatever, but as part of that community, we are pieces of the puzzle. And so if you think about how that system and that entire system becomes healthy, if you look at it as a body, if the part of your body is not functioning well, or refuses to cooperate, so to speak, right? If a part of your body is not cooperating, the entire body suffers. And so it's the same thing with us, youth will never be successful if we don't all step up and take our place in that community, whether it's helping to provide their basic needs, supporting the parents, being part of a community that provides the values and the mental and emotional support that they need, having adults that are caring for them. We need to step up to that role because we know that we are all going to be better because of it. Whether or not I have children or not.
Right. Yeah. I think all of those answers are great, right? And from the standpoint of, I think we keep focusing around this idea of the community and the village and everybody coming together, right? And some of those radical ways in which that looks and how that happens. So I was reading an article, and they were talking about some radical ways in which we're going to have to re-look at education or support education coming out of this pandemic, especially for our most vulnerable populations, right? And so I'll give you guys the example from the article, and then I want you guys to give me maybe a thought around what you think a radical solution could be, or a radical push could be for some of our most vulnerable students at the end. So one of the things that they talked about in this article was this idea of acceleration academies. And they say they consist of small groups of 8 to 12 students, where they would get 50 targeted hours of instruction over a 2-week time period, right? And they said it would recover 6 months of learning, and it would cost about $1,600 per student, which would be about $42 billion to reach 50% of the school children in the United States, right? So that's a radical solution, right? To dump $42 billion into a pot that would only get to 50% of the students, right? So in all actuality, we wanted to reach everybody. We're talking 80 plus billion dollars around these types of intensive pushes to regain education, right? To regain some of that has been lost. What could we do here locally in the city of Roanoke coming out of this pandemic, right? What could we do here locally to regain some of this, these learning hours, or some of this, what do they call it during the summer, brain drain, this extensive brain drain that we've had during this pandemic? How could we recover some of that?
I hear you say the word radical, and then you talk about 50% would only get it. And what can we do? I think a radical idea would be to put, and I say radical because it is radical because it never happens.
Right.
Radical would be to make the most vulnerable population the top priority.
Yes.
That would be the radical decision.
Yes.
Like, we're gonna make this population the top priority, and nothing else gets done until they are back where they're supposed to be. 2020 exposed things to where the most vulnerable population got the scraps again. When the world could have dug in and made sure, you know what, they're already doing bad.
Right.
The world shuts down, you know they're doing worse,
Right.
but we're still fed the scraps.
Right.
So my idea of the radical decision would be to make us a priority. I saw it with my own eyes where we were not the priority. And I made sure that the people around me, myself, any leader around me, that they knew I'm going to make us a priority. Whether I lose it all or not, we will be the priority in my eyes, I guess, to go back to we will be the priority over here. There's so many different things that you can do. We have these spaces, before schools are starting to open up, put us there first. Before, there's so many buildings and spaces that none of our kids it goes back to kind of what you said about community and people in our community making sure that we take care of each other. At some point, somebody from the outside is going to have to step in and make sure that we're taken care of because we're so far behind. And I don't say that to, put us down. It's just the radical truth that we need allyship. We need somebody to step in and use their platform and their privilege to empower us up so that we can get back to where we are supposed to be. And I say supposed to because that's where we are supposed to be. So I would say, the radical decision would be us as a priority.
Make us a priority. Yeah. And I love that answer because it's based off of it not happening for so long. It seems like it's so complex, right? But it's very simple, right? Make the most vulnerable the priority, right? Make the ones who are impacted the most in the worst or the harshest ways, make them the priority until they get to a place in which they're no longer the most vulnerable population, right? Sounds simple, but it seems like it's taking us forever to try to figure out how in the world do we do this, right? So I think that answer is great. Anybody else?
So I would say we definitely have to continue to reevaluate what we're looking at and have honest conversations. I think COVID accelerated, like Xavier was saying, accelerated problems that were already there. We know within the next decade, technology is going to put some of the poorest people out of work. We see it when we go to Walmart. All COVID did was accelerate that. So now you don't need to come because we have more computers doing the job, which means more. Or look at something as simple in our city as the buses don't run on Sunday. Well, who needs to get to work on Sunday is probably the poorest in our community. And, I mean, it's not rocket science to know that the poorest in our community don't have resources or the cars to get. And so it is connected. So we definitely have to have people who are coming alongside to help our parents and help our students at the same time. There has to be opportunities for both. One of the things with the last question is I love every quote I hear from Dr. King always reminds me it's coming out of the overflow of what he was rooted into. And so it wasn't, a lot of people like to take his quotes and like post it and go, but you're not going to be sustainable unless you're tethered to the same thing he was tethered to. And so servant leadership, he got that from someone, somewhere, which is Jesus, right? Like, let's just wash the feet of those people who are beneath me to demonstrate to them that I see them and I love them and that I don't consider myself higher or greater than them. And people want to do that, but it's not going to be long standing. It's going to be cool right now to serve or show up and volunteer and do something. For me, it has to come from the overflow of who I am as a person. And so when I show up, when Xavier hugs that kid, is because he's got an excess of love to give that kid. Like, he's tethered to something that's great. So next year, he's going to be hugging a kid, which is very important for me as a community person because I want Xavier to be hugging kids 10 years from now. And if I'm not blocking and providing opportunities and avenues for him and what he's doing to flourish, then I'm failing him, which is failing that kid. And oftentimes, we just want to be the one hugging the kid and not being the one supporting the person who's hugging the kid. And so each and every organization and person has to make sure they stay in their lane, own their lane, don't have mission drift and start driving in someone else's lane.
Say that one more time about staying in your lane.
Like, you have your lane's amazing. Like, your lane provides a platform so someone else can do something great. Own it and fall in love with it because and for me, that's exactly what we do. We are here to equip and provide opportunities for other people. I don't want to be on city council. I don't want to be the mayor. I want to make mayors. I want to make doctors. I want to inspire people to lead this country. I don't want to be the person with the microphone. One of the greatest things for me is pouring my life 20 years into young people is to hear my 30-year-old leaders encourage me with a word. Because when Katrina happened and they had to relocate to Dallas, and now they are professionals and they're like surgeons and they're like, hey, like there's nothing greater than that. And now seeing them pour into other people. And so it's staying in your lane. It's the overflow of who you are, and it's being tethered to something that's going to last a lot longer than what's cool right now. Serving people isn't always cool, but if you're not tethered to something that makes it greater than you, then as soon as it's not cool, you're going to go, I don't want to do that.
Or once it gets hard.
So once it gets hard,
Or it costs money.
That's
Once
the
it
big
hurts.
one. That's the big one.
What does it do to the budget if we run buses on Sunday?
Yeah.
Well, if people are more important than the budget, then we'll figure out how to find the resources to make sure we're taking care of the people. Because we're tethered into serving people more than we are serving ourselves or the systems we put in place to prohibit people from learning or having things. And so we'll make decisions that provide opportunities so that Xavier doesn't have to figure out how to find funds so that he can do something that's helping the community. We'll make sure the system is serving the people trying to help people.
And man, that's a whole nother conversation, right? A whole nother conversation around how systems, like you said, don't prioritize the most vulnerable of us, right? And so now those decisions when it comes to budget and different things of that nature, right, are the outcomes that are produced are certain outcomes because they're not tethered to what they should be. So that's a great response.
You know, what the radical thing too is not only what are we prioritizing, what are we willing to give up in order to get the result that we really want? Because maybe it really doesn't matter to us that much. If we're not willing to give something up in order for it to happen, how important is it really?
Is it really it?
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
We just spent like, I don't know, $250,000, $300,000 to create a system in Southwest or somewhere for the library. To people to pick up things like they have in the mall where you go and you drop books off and stuff. To make it more accessible for people in that part of the community. We also have a trolley a free trolley that runs over to that part of the community. But there are sections of the city who don't have access or a free trolley running over there. So there's free transportation for a system that drives past the library that could pick people up, and we spend $250,000 on that when there's so many other things in the city to help people who don't have, I don't know, the internet.
Right.
And so would $500,000 would be best used if we provide internet access to the parks and part of the community where our grades are the
Well,
lowest?
maybe you do need to be on the board. Maybe you do.
No, because someone from the board is watching this, one of these cameras, and they're going to relook at some of these things and go, you know what?
Constant accountability.
Yeah. And not get offended and go, you know what, we made a mistake. We made a decision during a time that this made sense, but it no longer makes sense. And so it's a lot cheaper and it's better for people to just cancel that and do something different.
Right.
Instead of supporting a bad idea and continuing to support it and make excuses for it.
So let me ask you guys this question, because you just brought up that somebody from within leadership may be watching this, right, or watching programs like this, right? And so I want to tie that to what Abby said about what are you willing to give up? And if you're not willing to give up what it takes in order to make that happen, how truly committed are you to that? In our positions and our roles, what responsibility do we owe to call out when we see that somebody may not be as committed to what's best, number one? And number two, how long do we allow for somebody to try and show or prove to us that they are committed to what's best?
So I'll start. As a social worker and also outpatient therapist, I solely stand behind the morals and values of social work. Completing that degree, it is really, I am walking in my purpose. So the mission statement, we are for the oppressed and vulnerable population. We are social justice. So my role as a social worker is to advocate on their behalf. And as we mentioned earlier, there may be individuals, students, families that may not have the means or the understanding, as Pastor Wilson mentioned earlier, had he not advocated for his son on this degree, this degree, the student may have completed school with this degree not knowing that this was not eligible for college. As a social worker, it is my job and my mission and my purpose to be that filler, to be that advocate, to be that educator, to be that liaison for someone that may not have the means, may not fully understand, may not have that access. So it is 200% my responsibility to serve in that purpose. And like I said, uncomfortable conversations. I mean, we're going to have them. It's not personal. It's for the greater good. And Xavier mentioned something earlier, a statement, selfless, being selfless. It's not about me. It is not about me. It is about equipping and elevating this student and their family and helping them to be their best self.
That's good.
Thank you.
Ask that question one more time.
So, one, how long do we allow for somebody to tell us that how long do we allow for somebody to show us that they are for the people, right? That they're for the most vulnerable, the least of these, right? How long do we allow for them to show that to us? And then two, what is our responsibility level in making sure that we are holding those individuals accountable, right? The people who are in the seats to be able to make decisions.
I think we have to be strategic, very strategic, in getting the people who are 100% pure and are selfless and want those positions to give back, making sure those people get a seat at the table. But you have to be strategic with it. You can't, it's not a bulldozer effect, because then you end up messing up the whole village.
Right.
So when I say strategic, it's like, for me personally, I'm making sure that all the wisdoms that I'm learning, I'm filtering them back down, making sure that I'm filtering them back down so that there's another branch of people that know what I know, and so that they can hold me accountable when I get a seat at the table, and I can pull somebody else up, and put them at a seat at the table. So I think it's strategic. I don't think it's just a bulldozer effect where we just get them out of there. I mean, we do have to do that. We do have to do that, but it's very much strategic. Like, we need to intentionally, I love that word, intentionally put the right person at the table.
Right.
And there's ways of going about that, especially as a vulnerable population.
Right.
We can't lose our position.
Right.
You have to have position in order to do that. That takes planning, that takes community, that takes love, that takes togetherness in order to be able to hold somebody accountable, and then right after holding them accountable, fill that position.
I'd say some things require a sledgehammer, some things require a small little knife to just make an adjustment, and we have to know the difference between the two. One of the statements that's pretty popular today is like, we're not our ancestors when it comes to social injustice. And to me, I take offense to that, because our ancestors did a great job of making sure they got the attention of the country and brought change. And so what should be said is, we've learned from our ancestors, and we're going to keep up the fight, or keep up the battle. And that's kind of the difference. One's a sledgehammer, one's a scalpel, is to make sure we make the adjustments. And I would say personally that there has to be a sense of, I'm not going to be owned by anyone. That in my position as a pastor, I have an audience of one, that I got to make sure I'm loving the people He's placed in front of me, and I take offense with the community here. Right. So when I hear things like, you're not getting a grocery store in Northwest from leadership, that strikes me to my core, because those are people who don't have access to food. And then I start thinking through the people riding their bicycles to go to the grocery store and all the other things connected to that. And so it has to be personal. That's when sometimes I do want to bring the sledgehammer in and say, yo, that's wrong. Then there are times where I go, okay, you're not going to do that. Then we're going to figure out how to provide healthy food options for this community. And I'm not going to ask you again. And then when the question comes up, or when it's time for you to get reelected, we're going to make sure someone who cares about people is sat in that seat. And you're not going to come take a little selfie at the ribbon cutting because you didn't care about people enough. And so it has to be strategic, like Xavier says. You have to take personal the problems of the people you're trying to serve. And when Xavier gets frustrated when something's not happening in the community, it's because he's in the community. Other people kind of drive by and they care and they go, those people don't have anything. It's a whole different story when you say, we don't have anything.
Right.
And that change. That's the whole game changer.
Yeah. Connecting, putting yourself in those individual shoes, right? Attaching yourself, and I think that's something that is very important and very difficult, right? For people to just see and to do, to attach yourself to a people, to a community that you can drive by, right? That you don't have to go visit, right? That you don't have to, your route to work, or your route to church, or your route to the gym, your route to wherever you're going doesn't take you along those particular paths. So that's great stuff. Anybody else? Well,
I wanted to go back to the other question when you talked about radical transformation.
yes.
Okay, so something that I think that could be radical is parents stepping it up just a little bit. Because the schools have stepped back, because of where we are, that means parents have to step forward. Like I said, one of my favorite sayings is, everything rises and falls on leadership. And leadership in the home has to step up. You have to give up something. A parent may have to give up a community meeting, or your Mary Kay party, or you might have to get up your Netflix so that you can help your child in math. But that radical transformation is, parents have to, you can't take your hand off. You got to get on like a gazelle with what's going on right now.
Right. No, and so a lot of the work that I do is centered around fathers, right? Around fathers and parents. I agree with you wholeheartedly, 100%, right? That this is definitely a time for us as parents to make sure that our hands are 100% involved in what's going on with our children and what's going on with everybody's children. As you mentioned, right? What's going on with everybody's children and you don't necessarily have to go out and help the whole community's children, right? But go grab two.
Right.
If everybody go grab two of them, right? So I agree with you 100%.
And that problem transcends even poverty. It's like every socioeconomic status group here in the city is struggling. There are parents who weren't parenting their children in middle class who are like, who are you and why am I teaching you math? And can someone please come teach this kid math?
Right.
So it isn't even just one segment. It's like parents need to parent.
Absolutely, absolutely. I am a parent coach, and my mentor is America's Super Nanny. And her philosophy is definitely a hands-on parenting type.
Right.
And that's radical.
Yeah.
Like you said, even before the pandemic, parents were sometimes hands-off. For me, I work with, high schoolers, and I see sometimes when parents, their student gets 16, they kind of, no. When they're 16, 17, and 18, you got to be on them, because that's when they can drive a car. That's when they can say, I'm going to the football game and then I'm going XYZ after. Thank God for the iPhone, because I know exactly where mine is at all times. And sometimes I have the
Amen.
radar called the Holy Spirit, and he'll say, go check on such and such is not where she's supposed to be. And I'm like, girl, every time you do that, I know.
Right.
So it's just got to be a hands-on and a push
Right.
as they get older.
Right.
And now even so, because they're home, and sometimes I ride down the street and I see in the middle of the day, it's packs of teenagers just walking down the street. Where your mom?
Right.
We can't just take our hands off,
Right.
because not only are we in a pandemic, we might have lots of pandemic babies running around because there's no
Pandemic.
supervision.
Right.
So we have to
And-
step it up.
I think we couple that with, because I agree wholeheartedly 100% that parents have to be ever more present in what's going on right now, right? And I think we couple that with what you were talking about, Charles, from the standpoint of a lot of parents, because they aren't priority, because these communities, these populations aren't priority,
They can't
are put in positions to where they can't be hands-on, right?
Yes.
A lot of the kids I see, if I may be, taking a drive through the street and see some kids outside playing, it may not be that mom or dad isn't hands-on, but because they have to go work
You're right.
3, 4,
Right.
5 jobs, right?
Right.
They can't be as hands-on as they would need to be. So I think a parallel approach of, yes, an increasing in radical parenting from the standpoint that you have to be hands-on, and then 2, an increase in from the city, from the school district, from the state, from the federal government, how we pour into what would allow parents to be that hands-on with their children.
Yeah, and I would say for us, our focus, our mission is not just, we came here, we looked at the city, and we're like, you know what, Lord, I think we made a mistake. There's great churches here. You don't need us here. Why are we here? Then we start to see some of the things behind the scene. And it's, okay, we get it, and we know why you want us to go to this part of the community. Most of our focus, I would say 50% of our focus, if not 55%, is the community development side. Is
Right.
providing the avenues and opportunities to provide opportunities for those who don't have it
Right.
in a serious way,
Right.
to put resources behind it, to
Right.
go after resources,
Right.
to inspire and behind the scenes inspire our teachers so that they can be inspired to teach again, and to also not only keep talent but attract talent, so that we have amazing teachers who will say, especially coming from where I'm trying to inspire people at church, I don't want you to take the better job because it pays you $20,000 more to go across town. That's a failure. Like, if you're on mission and you're serving people, you'll take the job that pays you less because you're excited to go there because you want to make an impact in that community because you're a missionary. And that's exactly what, is the church should be inspiring people to do. And then if you do go to Richmond to go to school or DC, that you go, I'm going back to where I came from. And I want to see that leadership avenue for people to not only come back and be a missionary, but to love it here.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's happened a lot, because I tell everybody I just recently left and went to Richmond, right? And right, I know, right? and
Right.
and Roanoke has had a draw on me over the last 4 years. I was here for 4, just left and went back to Richmond. But the draw that Roanoke has now had on me is something completely different, right? Because, and I think I challenge anybody out there who leaves and goes away to go back to where you're from, especially if you're from Roanoke, come back to Roanoke, because you may not even know. I didn't know that it would mean that much to me to be in Roanoke until I came back to Roanoke, right? I was fighting it. I finally came back to Roanoke, and I didn't understand how much it would mean to me until I got here. And it wasn't validated to me until I left again, right? And I understand how much that means to me. So we're at 6:10 now. I asked you guys for an hour, so I don't want to. I've taken you guys past the hour, right? But I think it's been a great conversation. I'll ask each of you guys to respond to one last quote, one last question, and this is for everybody. And we'll start here with Danielle, and then we'll just work our way back this way, right? COVID has been a difficult time for everybody educationally, right? In the world of education, it's been an especially difficult time for our students of color, right? Dr. King has a quote that says, "Only in darkness can you see the stars." Throughout this particular time, throughout this challenge, what are some of the stars, the bright spots that you have seen that we as a city, we as a community need to channel in on, focus on, and strengthen so that education moving forward for our most vulnerable populations is exactly what it needs to be by us being that priority population that you talk about?
So one thing I can say, I definitely want to applaud the city. I guess you could say it's from an equity standpoint. Although the pandemic has been very, very challenging and looking at education through a new lens, I will say that they completely stepped up with providing the resources. Students have laptops, there are hotspots for internet, and maybe, I'm always for the underdog, always. So students that may have had challenges academically before, with this smaller setting, having these resources, having the smaller groups, having more hands-on availability with their teachers, they have really blossomed over this last few months. So I will applaud, stepping up, adjusting and adapting to something that we never would have expected happening, and, providing these resources to these families. I have seen a lot of positives out of that. So I will give tremendous kudos on that.
Ask the question one more time.
What are some of the bright spots that you've seen during this challenging time that we can focus on moving forward?
From my lens, just looking in the community, kind of go back to what she said. I've seen a lot of students excel in a smaller setting. I've seen a lot of teachers really be extremely intentional, and whether that's coming by the site and giving the kid homework because they understand, okay, this kid is just not getting it through the online portal. Right. I need to give him paper and pencil. Right. I've seen a lot of teachers, get ground level. I've seen a lot of organizations really thrive, in 2020 being the year for them to get their platform. I've seen teams come together. I've seen families do things that they normally wouldn't have, and love on each other even more. It's hard to, I would highlight, my business for sure. We've done things this last year that are remarkable, and I'm so proud of everything and everyone that, has been influenced or is a part of. But I think to highlight anything is just, I think people are a little bit more, I think people's eyes are a little bit more open. And I go back to 2020 when everything first hit, and you look at 2020 and you think it's supposed to be this remarkable year, and this is the year of everything because it's 2020. This is a year of vision, but as my mentor said, no, this was the year that everything was exposed. Right. This was the year that the curtains opened up. This was the year where you really got to see who's for you, who's not. This is the year that you got to see who's going to just ride by your community and say they, or you're gonna see the person that gets out of the car and knocks on the door.
Right.
So it may not be a highlight, but I take 2020 and I look at it as it allowed you to see who's really in your circle. It allowed organizations to really see who's truly an ally for being an ally or an ally for the pat on the back. So, like I said, it may not be a highlight, like this amazing thing, but I think 2020, for black people at least, allowed you to see, hey, stand up. Nobody's coming to save us, bro.
Right.
Like, nobody's coming to save us. We are in this thing, and we have to be in this thing together. And so I could go on and on about that, but that's my highlight.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
I would say I have two. One was Stephanie Moon.
Yep, Stephanie Moon.
I sat down with her because I'm a big leadership guy. My undergrad's in leadership, and I always ask leaders how they lead, why you do what you do. And one of the things she shared with me was that years ago back, that there was leaders in the community that when they spoke up, people listened, that they commanded respect, and people paid attention when they showed up. That's one of the highlights for me, is that I see just a group of young leaders today that are really serious about what they do. They're serious about people. They are not playing games. They're not selfish. And that's very encouraging to see this new group of leaders stepping up. And then the second thing for me is that I'm learning more and more there's so many people this summer, especially with all the stuff that was happening, that really care, and they really are looking for opportunities to make an impact in real ways.
Right.
And that they are actually watching some of the leaders who think they're alone, and they're looking for opportunities to get in and make real impact. And I'm really excited about that I think in the next couple of years that the community alone is just ripe for some great things. And I think we're going to see that happening in the next 2 or 3 years in like major ways.
That's good. That's good.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes.
I have an answer, but I want to
Yes.
make sure.
So in this challenging time, what are a highlight or some highlights that you've seen that we can really harness in on and focus on and continue those things out?
In working with students getting to college, not having to take the standardized SAT and ACT to get into college has been transformational. In the area of self-esteem, having that belief that, yes, I believe I can, because I've been accepted to 4 or 5 schools even before Christmas break.
Right,
Usually, when I'm working with students, they apply to schools and their applications have to be in by Christmas break.
Right.
This year, even students that struggle, they've had 4 and 5 acceptances to college
Right.
before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And so getting rid of that test, which sometimes it's just not designed for certain populations, and there's research to support that information. But yeah, getting rid of standardized test. My students have blossomed without having to take that test.
Yeah. That's awesome. And I'm pretty sure there's a bunch of people out there that agree with you on that one too. That agree with you on that.
Bright spot for me. I'm like, I've seen a lot of things happen, a lot of really good things and cool things happen. But I think one of the, more heartwarming things for me and inspiring things is to see leadership and to see voices of youth, rising up. And it really touched me, the street artwork. When that project is led by youth, and it's the youth having a loud voice in that, and making a statement about what they want this community to be about, that's power, and that's change. And when I see a group of youth leading opportunities to register voters, not just young people, but in neighborhoods, that's, setting an example for change. It shames all of the old people, all of us old people. But it also kind of gives me hope, right? That there are people coming behind us, and that we have done our job,
Right.
To inspire, to mentor, to instill a belief in our young people that they can change this and that they are part of the change that we want to see in our communities. That to me is like a definite bright spot.
Right. Well, that's good. That's good. Well, that's it for us. I wanna first, before we leave, thank each of you for agreeing to be here with us and share with everybody. I know how they say it. I know you could have been anywhere else in the world right now.
Be here with
But
me.
you chose to be here with us. So I definitely appreciate that, and I want to commend each of you for the work that you are doing in the community. And thank you guys so much for doing this. And I hope everybody out there, you enjoyed the conversation. You had some opportunities to hear some good information. I love all of you guys out there, and go away and love, go in the way of spirit of Dr. King, and go love somebody, and go hug somebody. Go hug somebody. It's in your household, though, because you got to be 6 feet away. Go hug somebody in your household.
Air hug.
Well, that's it. Thank you, guys. Are we still live? Am I still live?